everybody. Welcome to a pretty pointless video in the grand scheme of things. I'm kind of trying out some more, casual of the topic sort of stuff. Just kind of, I don't know, get thoughts out, sort of mark history. I mostly make these videos for myself anyway, so yeah, I'm trying this out a bit, so this ain't going to be a, tightly scripted, thoughtful thing. I am trying to write some scripts. Suck at it, but hey, I try. That's all you can do. At the time of recording this, we are 12 days away from Donkey Kong Bananza, which I've spoken about a couple times on this YouTube channel. Put up the iconic clip here. Oh my God, it's Donkey Kong! But yeah, so as you can imagine, I'm very excited, to say the least. I'm at that point in the hype where it's very hard to do much else. I get very, I think, there's quite a few people that do, but I especially, if I'm really excited for something like this, it's just very hard to do much else for me. I try to do other things, but I don't know, if I didn't push myself, I really could just kind of sit in a room and just do nothing for 2 weeks until it happens, because I'm just, it's all I care about, really. It's not true fully, but it's very exciting. It's definitely the most excited game I have for the year. Most excited game I've had for a couple years. Last time I really felt this way about a game, or anything specific, was kind of Pikmin 4. Which, granted, I don't know if the hype's to that level. Pikmin 4 was really something. I don't know. That was something special. Donkey Kong Special 2 in its own way. It's had some things different and better and worse than Pikmin 4's hype. Each thing's its own thing. That's what's fun. But yeah, Donkey Kong's coming out pretty soon. And it's all I can think about. It's all I can do. It's all I can watch. And I have thoughts on it. And you know what? I figure kind of, while the game's still not out and we don't know everything, which is an aspect I'm going to probably talk about, why don't we kind of, I don't know, just capture this moment in time before the game comes out and we know everything and we all have opinions on it. Let's just capture what it's like not knowing and wondering what it could mean for this game and Nintendo stuff going further, and all this kind of big existential stuff. So I think for me, what's kind of interesting about Donkey Kong Bananza is that while I am extremely excited for it, and I have no doubt it's going to be a really good game. There's no fear that I'll buy it and be like, this sucks, I know for a fact it's going to be good. In fact, I think it's going to be really good. I am more concerned about it than I have been for other games I've been hyped for. I have a lot more, reservations and, caution going into Donkey Kong Bananza. And a lot of this because it's just still, the game is really, really weird. I feel like that's an aspect, though, that's not being talked enough. It's so weird. I think I and a lot of other people have been really waiting and hoping for a big 3D Donkey Kong game. I love Donkey Kong. I love big Nintendo 3D platformers. And it's just combine the two, make a new big one. It'll be great. And I always imagine them playing it relatively safe. I kind of had in my head it would be a bit like DK64, but, not as many collectibles, not as tedious. Predicted they would definitely bring the Kremlings back. I thought that was pretty much a given. And that was pretty much it, as far as what I had expected. But everything about Bananza is nothing like that. It is really, truly its own thing entirely. It is going for something completely different. Not only from Donkey Kong, but really from any other Nintendo 3D platformer. There's remnants of other games in here. There's a bit of Mario Odyssey, there's a bit of Zelda. But fundamentally, it's its own thing, which is simultaneously very, very exciting, but is also a little scary. Because, I think with the Switch, it launched with Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, which were both very different for their relative series, and I think going into it, I maybe I, and maybe to a bit of a degree other people, were a lot more optimistic in that regard. You know, just like any change is good change, just try everything, let's do it. But, you know, in years since, it's become easier to kind of see the flaws in both games. Even though both are great, you know, they're phenomenal games. I'd recommend them to anybody. But they are, you know, they are still flawed. And both didn't really get a chance to, like, I don't know, to, like, improve. Because, like, Mario Odyssey never got a sequel, which is so bizarre. But, you know, maybe Donkey Kong's the answer to why. And Zelda, while it did get a sequel, didn't really, I don't know, it didn't really improve a ton on what was already there. It mostly just expanded on what it already did well and what it was already setting out to do. So I think with Donkey Kong, there is kind of this concern that, like, you know, it's very new, it's very different, and that's very exciting, but also, does that mean it's going to be kind of messy and a little bit unpolished and not perfect? Which is okay, you know, no game's perfect, but at the same time, I don't know when we're going to get another chance at this. You know, it used to be that you could pretty reliably bet on a game like this, or a 3D Mario or something, happening every 3 to 4 years. But, you know, it's been 11 years since the last Donkey Kong game, it's been 8 years since the last 3D Mario. Is this going to be the last 3D Donkey Kong we get for like 10 years? And if so, I don't know, I think there's a higher kind of pressure to, like, really get this one right and to really satisfy and, you know, quench our thirst for the ape for, you know, at least kind of 10 years. Which is a lot to ask of a game, you know, and especially one this experimental. And it's one that I kind of wish we didn't have to going into it, but that's kind of what I think Nintendo's kryptonite at the moment is. They're making really great, really experimental stuff, but it takes a really long time, and it's hard for them to multitask and have multiple at the same time, so we kind of just get this, or we don't. You know, we just kind of gotta accept what we get and just sit on it for a while and just hope it comes out real good. And as far as things I am concerned about with the game, I'd say at the moment my number one worry is the levels. And this was a worry I started to have after the last Direct they did for Donkey Kong. Because with Mario Odyssey, which as we know now is the same team, they pretty much showed 90% of the levels before the game released. By the time they did the September Direct of that year, we had seen about 90% of the levels. There were really only, I think, 2 or 3 that weren't shown that ended up being in the final game. And when it came to the levels that we did see, there was at least, I want to say like 9, you know, or 10 even, that we saw before the game came out, and each one was, you know, vastly different from each other, each one going for kind of its own thing. But with Donkey Kong Bananza, you know, the game comes out in 2 weeks, and it feels like we've really only seen like maybe 6 levels. You know, the reveal trailer had like 5 levels, it kind of felt like. And then the new Direct, really the only new level that we concretely saw was the watermelon fruit level. So that raised a few red flags for me, because I don't know, I'm greedy. I like platformers to have a lot of levels. You know, I thought Mario Odyssey had a pretty great actually number of levels, you know, each one very unique. And I was definitely hoping for Donkey Kong to have a similar amount. And at the moment, I'm feeling fairly optimistic about the final level count. Some smart eggs on the Reddit, they did some calculations regarding the amount of bananas that we've seen so far in the levels and how many you need for skill points, and they've been calculating it based on how many you would need to get every skill point in the game. It's a whole thing, it's all these calculations, but basically they've calculated that the game is looking to have around 900 to 1,000 bananas to collect, which would be around the same amount of moons there were in Mario Odyssey. And with the amount of levels that we've seen so far, that would only account for about 300 to 400 of the bananas. Meaning that if the banana math is right, which I hope it is, that means that there is at least maybe 4 or 5 more levels in the game that we have not seen. And I think if the final level count was around 9 or 10, I would be pretty satisfied with that. You know, of course, I'll be greedy. I want more. You know, I want as many levels as possible, but I think that's a good number to shoot for. However, it's not just the amount of levels. I'm also a little concerned regarding the variety and general theming of the levels. Because so far, the only level that has, like, I don't know, really kind of stuck out to me as being like, ooh, I really like how that looks and how that feels, is the kind of foresty, jungly level. And that's mostly because that's just kind of what I would have expected, you know? When I pictured a 3D Donkey Kong in my head, I was kind of thinking, yeah, lush jungle where you can climb all the trees. But aside from that, you know, and definitely it's because of the whole level terraforming gimmick, which is a great gimmick, and if that has to impact the levels, then so be it. You know, the levels are a little, I don't want to say samey, but they do feel kind of similar to each other. It hasn't been like Mario Odyssey, where like every level you see is like, oh man, this is so different. This one's way more vertical. This one's way more capture focused. This one's way more water focused. You know, they're a little similar to each other. And I just really hope that in the final game, you know, because there's a lot of bonus areas and challenges, and of course there's all these weird mechanics that we haven't gotten to see a lot of. I really hope that each level is able to really stand out amongst each other when it comes to the mechanics and challenges that are in each level. I hope that there's more chances for the visuals to really get to shine and to, like, again, you know, just have a lot of more variety and just generally be like, wow, you know, I didn't expect the game to have a thing that looked like this. And again, you know, it's funny I'm like talking about concerns. I'm fairly optimistic about this game, but you know, this is just where I am. They have shown a lot of levels though that like do have that look. You know, already like the Ingot Isle area that like you start in, I love how that looks. I love the colors. I love the old feel. I like all the little monkey miner NPCs. I love everything about that. So I'm like, you know, if every level has kind of a little bit of that in it, you know, just, you know, unique NPCs, unique looking environments, you know, buildings, architecture, that's going to go a really long way. And I feel optimistic that they will, and that we just haven't really gotten to see that. But speaking of things we haven't gotten to see, have you noticed how cagey Nintendo is being about a lot of things with this game? It's very surprising because I don't know if you noticed this, but Nintendo loves spoiling their own games. They are very into making games where you see like 80 to 90% of all the levels and bosses in trailers before you play said game. And unless they somehow have with Donkey Kong, and we just didn't notice or we just thought there would be more, it really feels like they haven't. With Donkey Kong, like I said, we've really only seen like 5 or 6 levels. We've only really seen like 2 bosses. And, you know, I'm pretty certain the game will have more. We've only seen, like, a couple of cutscenes, and with how much of a focus the story seems to be in this game, which I'll talk about after this, is pretty low. And one that I'm extremely surprised about, we've barely heard any of the songs. Like, a big thing with this game is there's going to be vocalized songs again, like in Mario Odyssey, but they haven't played them fully. They play them in little snippets here and there, but they're really waiting for us to play the game to hear it all, which I think is awesome. I really, really like that they're being cagey. It's just weird. Like, I've really wished that Nintendo would be like this, you know, have more mysteries, have more stuff to theorize. And sometimes they do. You know, like, I think Tears of the Kingdom, you know, although I think Tears of the Kingdom was accidental. I think they were just bad at communicating, and they just kind of left us to theorize for a while about it. But, you know, something like Pikmin 4, right? Like, I was really into theorizing, figuring out Pikmin 4, but by the time that game was coming out, we kind of knew most of what was going to be in that game. Really, the only thing they didn't show was, like, the final area and boss, which were fun to discover upon playing, but, you know, that's pretty much it as far as really big surprises. But with Donkey Kong, they're really banking on early Switch 2 adopters buying and being surprised firsthand, which is very, very surprising. I would not have thought they would do that, and I didn't think they would do it with Donkey Kong of all things. You know, I don't know, they only like really being cagey with Zelda, but to do that with Donkey Kong, and not just with Donkey Kong, but the major Switch 2 single-player game that's going to sell people, it's very surprising. But, I don't know, I'm kind of into it. I think a fun side effect of all this has been that Donkey Kong is kind of becoming Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, the amount of theorizing I am seeing for this game and what it's hiding has been pretty unreal. Like, I don't think I've seen this level of theorizing for a Nintendo game since, like, I mean, I would say Zelda, but I don't know. I didn't even see this much for Tears of the Kingdom, you know? Donkey Kong is really packing them theories, you know? People are analyzing all the dialogue that Cranky says in, like, demos, and they're translating banana hieroglyphs. Like, it's going really crazy. And there's a part of me that's a little worried that, you know, maybe we're all just in over our heads. We're just reading way too deep into this, just assuming Nintendo's hiding things when they really aren't. There just isn't much to hide. But at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of fun. You know, this has been really fun. And I'm like, maybe this was their big master plan. You know, maybe they just thought like, hey, we're just gonna go kind of crazy with this game. And I like going crazy. I don't know. I don't know. I'm an Ari Aster fan. I like when artists go a little nutty with the stuff they make. So I'm like, I don't know. It's very interesting. And kind of on a similar note to that, this game has a lot of story. Like, it's very surprising how seriously and secretive and just overall big they're going with the storyline of this game. You know, I don't need Nintendo games to have great stories. I certainly don't mind when they do either. You know, I'm kind of intermediate on that. Like, Nintendo game doesn't have a good story, that's fine. If it does have a good story, hey, that's great. You know, that's kind of my stance. And with Donkey Kong, I really didn't expect any story. You know, I just figured, you know, King K. Rool steals bananas, get him back. You know, that's kind of all I really expected. But no, they're going crazy with the story here. They're making all these new characters, and they're completely recontextualizing and redesigning Pauline, and doing a completely new dynamic between her and Donkey Kong that we've never seen Nintendo try to do. And the entire storyline isn't just about bananas, it's about going to the Earth's core and making a wish, and I don't know, it's really, it's a lot more than I or anyone else would have ever expected. And again, I think kind of similar to like the theorizing, I'm like, I hope that, I don't know, I hope we're not getting our hopes up and just thinking it's a really in-depth story, but like, I don't know, again, it's the messaging. It's so interesting that the storyline is something they're really pushing with this game, and they're not just pushing it, they're being secretive about it, you know? Like, they're showing us these little bits here and there, but they're saying, like, oh, you gotta play the game to learn more, and I'm like, I'm not used to that from Nintendo, you know? I'm used to them kind of telling me everything, so it's very cool. It's very cool, and I just hope it can really live up to that, you know? I hope that the storyline, while I'm not expecting masterpiece, you know, it's not gonna be Last of Us or nothing, I'm hoping it has some fun twists and turns, and, you know, at the very least, I think it's gonna have a pretty amazing finale, like Mario Odyssey. You know, the finale of that was fantastic, and I'm like, you know, and that didn't have this much setup that Donkey Kong's doing. I'm like, with this much setup, I'm expecting this finale to be pretty insane. So, yeah, I'm just really hoping it can kind of, you know, really live up and do that. I think as far as kind of other thoughts to put into this pointless therapy session, I just hope the game has, you know, good challenges, good ideas, good levels, you know. It's very clear now that this is the Mario Odyssey 2 that we never got on Switch. It's basically taking the Mario Odyssey format of, you know, exploring wide open levels to find hundreds of a specific collectible, but it is doing its own thing with it, and on top of that, it is refining it. Specifically with how now you get skill points from collecting the main thing, which will hopefully kind of fix some of the issues that some people had with Moons from Mario Odyssey. We're also seeing far more in-depth challenges in regards to the specific challenge areas. You know, they're very much like challenge rooms from Mario Odyssey, but they look a lot more in-depth and a lot more specific and even kind of puzzly than Mario Odyssey was. So again, that's a really exciting evolution of that idea. And, you know, kind of like I said at the opening, it's like, you know, we really wanted them to iterate on Mario Odyssey, because Mario Odyssey was great. You know, it's fantastic. It's phenomenal. I'd recommend it to anyone. But it also had had a lot of shortcomings that felt like just with the right sequel, it's so easily just could add a sequel with new levels, and they could just so refine it. You could just so see how talented this team is, and how much, if they could just go back, they could refine everything about it, and they just never, I don't know, it's not they didn't get the chance, it's just, I don't know, it just didn't happen the way that we wanted, and it seems like Donkey Kong now is the answer to that. This is the refining sequel. And just with how much time it's been since Mario Odyssey, and how much I've played Mario Odyssey, oh my lord, you have no idea how much I've played that. I've probably played through Mario Odyssey like 25 times. If I'm being safe, I could go even, I could say, it might even be 30, maybe 40. I don't know how many times I played that game. I played it so much. And just with how much time I played it, and how much time it's been since then, I just really, I don't know, they have such an opportunity here. They have such a chance to just bring it all together. They're bringing all of Mario Odyssey, they're bringing all of Donkey Kong, they're bringing new things, they're bringing old things. There's just so much that's combining and reiterating, and so much stuff going into this game, and it's just, I don't know, it feels like it's gonna be hard to put it all together. I couldn't do it. I'm being all high and mighty here, sitting in my chair, being like, Nintendo, do this, do that. But man, I couldn't do this. Like, this is crazy. This is an insane task of a game to make. And I don't know. It's a golden banana of an opportunity with so much potential and so much hope. And to have this much too, and to be this cagey, and to be this mysterious, it's just, I don't know, there's so much about this game. There's too much. There's honestly too much about this game. I thought almost Pikmin 4 was like too much to comprehend with how much they were changing and refining the formula. But no, man, Donkey Kong is just insane. This is an insane game. And, that's why I gotta make this video. It's too insane to let it fester in our brains. It's too much to process. Nintendo just dropped this on us and was like, hey, 3 months later it's coming out, and it's like, we just gotta process this now? We're dealing with inflation, we got tariffs, we got all this other stupid crap going on, we just gotta process the most ambitious, insane 3D platformer y'all have ever done is coming out in July? Okay. Alright then, I guess that's just what we gotta process. And I don't know. This is, I guess, my way of processing it. So I hope you enjoyed taking this journey with me through the pre-hype and expectations for Donkey Kong Bananza. I certainly hope this doesn't age bad. I've made some other videos where I predict and hope for things, and it's aged horribly. But, that sometimes you gotta take risks. I think it's important to dream, to hope, and just go out on a limb for things, because sometimes, it really comes back. Sometimes it can really be something amazing. To kind of, to make a very bizarre comparison, the other day I rewatched Beau is Afraid, which is probably my favorite movie of the last, 10 years. I just adored a lot, and that was a movie where, the first trailer I saw of it, I was like, that's something special. I don't know what it is yet, but there's something special about that movie. And then I saw it, and I'm like, yeah, it is special. It's like the greatest thing ever made. And, sometimes you gotta go out on them limbs. You gotta see something and be like, that speaks to me. That compels me. And I don't care if it's cringy. I don't care if it flops. I don't care if it all falls apart. It's a broken dog-eat-dog world out there. We gotta dream. We gotta hope. We gotta play a game with monkeys and suspenders. And that's all I gotta say about that. Take care, everybody. See y'all in 12 days when I inevitably make 5 videos about the game when it releases. And hopefully, I don't know. Why should I even hope someone listens to this? What does it matter what I have to say about this? Like I said, I'm mostly doing this for me. I like having little time capsules and abilities to get out what I say onto not on page, onto the Audacity MP3 file. So, I hope you enjoyed this Audacity MP3 file, and see y'all later. Take care, eat bananas, goodbye.